Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad that you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have a very, very interesting show. I just went through an incredible experience with this gentleman that I have in the studio with us today, Warren Berrigan, here from the West Coast, who has developed something called vocal biomatrix. This is a technique, if you will, having to do with utilizing the voice in what I would describe as the fullest way possible. It feels like, through what Warren was doing with me, my toes to the top of my head have gotten turned on, like a light switch, a tingling light switch, moved through my whole body and got me going in a way that could only bring to mind what it was like before human consciousness coming through the canal and into a body. That was the sense, if I were to put any kind of name to it at all. That's what it felt was going on. Now, I had no idea about this before Warren came and sat down with me. But now I can tell you, through some very simple interactions, some breathing techniques that he'll be speaking about, what is possible. And I have a feeling that this is just the beginning. So Warren, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you. What do you think about that description? That felt like the realest possible kind of explanation I could give at the moment. Have you heard explanations like that?
No, that was one of the better ones I've ever heard. And I appreciate that. I think you're right. I think the experience one has, as you had, was special because what you brought to it, what I helped you bring to it. I didn't create it. You created it. It was your experience. It was your transaction. It was your fulfillment, your experience, your empowerment.
Yes. Now, when you work with people, what is it that they are typically looking for? Obviously, you began as a working with singers, working with vocalists who wanted to improve their voice as an instrument. Then something happened.
Well, I found that the instrument was the entire body, and that's within the body, but outside the body I found there was an energetic processes that went on outside the body as well, in which you were able to vent through and bring back into the body. And I call it, for want of a simpler way, just light. It's not visual light, but it's energetic light.
It's experienceable light.
Yes.
In no uncertain terms.
Yes, it's very empowering because a woman lifting a car for child, I believe, perhaps utilized that kind of light too. When brute force can't move that car, I think the ultimate form of her ability to change that metal is as an alchemy that she brings to it through the life process, or through his light. People in car accidents or whatever, they talk about this light. So there are people who are familiar with this light.
Yes. Indeed, the first thing that really comes to mind is people who have been involved in a spiritual quest of some sort and are looking to open themselves up to an entire infinitude of light. And that is in some sense what I felt I was connecting to. It was pre-egoic consciousness, before I had the formation of my identity as I know myself. And I may add to that, even as I sit here speaking to you now, that formation that has been much in place for most of my life has been altered. And I'm experiencing myself anew. And it feels good.
Yes. There's a functional truth as to who you think you are and who you really are is fundamentally not not appropriate. You've
They're not in sync.
No. There's people who say, I can't tell a lie, who are very busy living it.
Yes.
And so when I say that, I say, how can you test for that? Is there a basic test for it? Yes, there is. If you're using somebody else's voice, if you created a voice for other people's ears, are you not functionally already in defiance of your own truth? You're too busy manipulating other people's ears. As you speak to others, you gradually believe that to be your own voice. And so many people, when they hear their voices for the first time, really, in fact, say, that doesn't sound like me. What they really mean doesn't feel like me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a functional basis for truth. And so as any psychosocial adaptation anywhere in the world has its own truth built into it. And I'm saying truth is a function, not a concept.
Mm-hmm. It's a living, vital function that, as you described before, you described it also as an absolute function, in which we are, you could say, destined to live, mm-hmm. if not now, later, but we will come to it.
Yes. Well, as people have heard before, great minds think alike. And their progression into that thought makes them even more bonded. And it's interesting because as we look at that, or we observe that, we realize there are functional relationships that seem to be carved in rock. Uh-huh. And it appears that we are in more direction than we'd like to believe. And the universality of the forces oftentimes give way to an attitude of which we assume a personal freedom, which I think is more theatrical than real.
Wow. So through this work, vocal biomatrix, great phrase, you're in a sense helping to realign a person to their true voice, which will then, since that voice is connected most fundamentally to light, which is truth, you could, I guess, say the light of truth, they're going to be progressively more and more in their lives aligned to that light and to truth.
And corrected. If a car came into a junkyard all squished up, and you wouldn't have the serial number or the model number or the ability to define what it looked like, how would you know how to straighten up to? Mankind needs a lot of straightening up.
You could say that again. Now, how did you discover this process?
An attempt, I became very intrigued with acoustical singers, those singers of the past who had to fill concert halls without microphones, remembering that only within recent years have we seen the electronics emerge and the high fidelity, which was very poorly defined in my early years, mm-hmm. and gradually developed to what it is now. That's a very brief time, and one has to view that our senses ourselves, our appearances of ourselves are now so flawed by equipment making us appear greater than we are. If you look at the acoustical singers, they had to fill concert halls.
Sure,
they did
all over Europe. Paris, Milano, all the great operatic halls, sure.
That's right. The great Caruso did not emerge by any accident. He had to fill those halls.
That's right.
Right now we throw a microphone in front of somebody and view how great they are. That is not within the equivocation of the nature of the energetic nature of the power of being. My interest is more than the voice at this point, however, mm-hmm. because humanity...
But that's where it started.
It started as an
interest in that kind of projection.
That's right. Uh-huh. My attempt to instrument the voice field for voice teachers, I realized that it's very hard to tell at this point, but I was a bodybuilder. Lost a little bit out along the way, but...
No, you're a voice builder.
So my realization that in 6 months I could do quite powerful things with my body. I did not find that the simple little muscles of the throat and body were subject to that kind of an effect. And that was confusing to me. It didn't make any sense. So as I looked further, I realized that we were dealing with a totally different kind of an instrument, and that the nature of the instrument was much more boundless than just operating at the economy of one's vocal experience. That economy is subject to a huge amount of a new nature, a fundamental nature that transcended the word, transcended the knowledge of ourselves as we appear to be, not as we are. And I keep emphasizing that because it's very, very easy to presume what we're about and lay our lives down for it, for that matter.
Yeah.
And I believe that as we become more esteemed to that light, become forces that light, you become a point of light. The light you give away in value, formally or informally, to others, is you will be given more light. And I say given because I don't believe you are able to do anything but be given to. And with all our assumptions of
on this level.
Yes, yes, on this level, I say yes. I think we have a view of ourselves that's so fundamentally not sound, and I don't mean that.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But
yeah,
and my expectation is
you're very right.
As I worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, I know more about their voices than they do. So when they come to me, when I say that to them, it kind of catches them and say, well, of course, he's a voice teacher, he should know. But I'm saying you live with your voice longer than I have. And I look at your voice as your potential for who you are. Not only the voice that you speak to others or communicate to others or entertain by others, but also as you might entertain yourself as you hum away into some kind of a inner sanctum or an inner massage, perhaps.
Yes.
If you will.
Or speak to oneself, for that matter.
Oh, yeah. People do that.
Oh, yeah. I was doing it last night. I was just having fun making myself laugh. There was no one else to make me laugh. So, yeah, it's interesting. And there are any number of things in life that you can focus on. And actually, the entire world can be opened up to you through that particular focus. Of all things, it's interesting to me that you have chosen to focus on the voice, because as you are making the statements you're making, Warren, you're suggesting that there is some almost ultimate resonance or connection to our spiritual foundation through the voice. Because I was thinking, the word vocare from the Latin means to call, our calling. And we call with our voice, but we are called into life to fulfill a certain role, a certain meaning, a certain purpose for the larger whole, as well as for our own soul. How we speak is what helps to deliver us to the fulfillment of the goal.
The experience...
Is that making sense?
Yes, it does. I just want to expand it a little bit. I say, when a doctor checks your heart or your lungs or kidneys, there's a generic basis for that, the blood system and all that. He looks at that within the context of the human system.
As in genetic?
As in genetic, yes.
Okay.
But so often we say as in genetic as though it's some kind of a lesser state of ourselves. If in fact the genetic state is somehow able to be expanded by that light, or is the result of that light, are we able then possibly deal with spinal cord injuries and cancers and God knows what are the other possibilities out there? We don't know what those are.
Oh, okay. So are you suggesting that the realignment, that correction you were referring to, of our voice to our true voice will have a repercussion in our genetic coding?
Absolutely.
that can then rectify any other kind of imbalance, physical, emotional, or otherwise, in the system.
I could show you where transactions between one word and another have a huge transitional energy field, potential field, that has never been materialized. And when that is materialized, and I expect it will be, we're entering the new millennium, as you know.
Yes.
And my expectation is that when we host a new energy field in these transitional points, we'll find the hallways of life expand into the ballrooms of life. We've been dancing around in the hallways of life. It's time to arrive at the ballroom.
And have a ball.
I'm open to it.
Yes, indeed. I think you're right. You just reminded me of something that I want to ask you about, a comment you made during our session about a halo around my head that emerged or that you saw. Could you comment on what that was and how it got there?
Well, we talked about the paraconscious state, which I believe to be a higher state of consciousness.
Yes.
It emerges through the inner light.
You're distinguishing that from subconscious.
Yes,
the paraconscious.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a non-ordinary state.
It's an exceptional ordinary state.
Yes.
And I say it that way because it's not only a rarity of experience, but it's a transaction that can be determined, and we can actually create it. When that inner light occurs, if the eventuality is that you see people, who those people are is unknown.
You see that in your mind's eye?
You see it as very clear, and you see it from the third person. You turn into the third person. You observe yourself in the first person. When you're in that state, this halo, I call it halo, it's around your head. It's always there in all people. Where other parts of the body lose that contact with that energetic field, the halo is there in all people at all times. In the paraconscious state, what occurs, that halo fixes. It will not move until you return to your conscious state. That halo, what happens, wraps itself around your head. It's outside your head. And that halo, when you enter the paraconscious field, if I moved your head into that halo, it cuts into the brain and discharges energy into your body and gives you a powerful experience that transcends concepts. Concepts cannot ignite you like that. But perhaps maybe it could impact you as nothing else that I know about can do so.
Now, what's actually doing the igniting is not your own so-called healing energy, but it's what you are facilitating awakening in the person with whom you're working.
Yes.
Is that so?
Yes. It is your biological and spiritual nature to know these things and to be a part of them, to know them and become them. Outside of them, we become less than we should be. If we think about ourselves as universalities, then we have to look at ourselves in conceptual states as being less than universal.
Yes. Well, I'm sitting here and my audience knows me, certainly to a certain decent extent, and know how I deal with people, react, ask questions, comment, and I am sure there is recognition of a qualitative shift, because there is one. And I can't explain it, but I can share with you, and will, a little of what it's like, because this is, I have met, let me say, Warren, so many healers. I've had many on the show. I've known many because of my own background in the holistic healing arts, and people put their hands on and they do this and that, or on the energy field around the body. And, well, it's fun, and it's often enjoyable. And sometimes little results occur here and there. Not particularly measurable, but nonetheless a little something. This is so radically different than anything I've experienced, except maybe the feeling of, if I could use the phrase, coming back home to a feeling internally of myself that predates my knowing myself as a personality. Mm-hmm. That's maybe the best I can do. In summing up, it's like an internal energy was released and just ran like a whirlwind through my body and altered my state so profoundly that I lost all bearing of where I was, who I was as such, as a personality, and was just in a state of electrically tingling existing. And then slowly, through your kind presence and kind of nurturance, I felt myself returning to some semblance of standard frames of reference.
Well, the standard frames of reference in most people define their lives.
Yes.
If you were one of those people that have to be sitting on your television set in order to know life by two dimensions or by theater, you you lose your contact, your essence. The most complex thing, and I want to remind people, the most complex things you ever done, you've not thought about. If you look at that, at your own conception, your own birth, mm-hmm. I doubt if you thought about that. Yet the revelation of that and the fact that you were born, that you came into existence and then you started, with that existence you either had talents or you repressed those talents. If the talents were embraced, that light was allowed to flow through you, that talent became manifest. And you became an embodiment of that talent. In the way that we are arriving in the new millennium, that's my belief, that if you become a point of light, you have to be able to give of value to others. Any attitudes against people that's destructive to people in any way mm-hmm. will deny you your right to more evolved light.
I think that's a very wise position. And what your work is doing is really facilitating people being more in touch with their own light, their own being a point of light. So the giving and then the evolution can really progress. Yeah.
Right. The other part of this I want to bring out also is that we have it's very easy to realize that there is so much within ourselves that we go, you mentally do the uncertainties. Uh-huh. When you choose to beckon those uncertainties, you'll find the uncertainties are not empty spaces, but they're potentially fulfilling statements of feeling by which you can embrace into a new order, a new function. It's my belief we're going to come to a point where we're going to revolutionize evolution. And the evolutionary processes may never come into the foreground that they have been, that they've conducted business about for thousands of years.
Interesting. They will be accelerated? Is that
they will transcend.
Transcend.
They will not just accelerate, they will transcend.
Wow. I want to ask you, practically speaking, not that that isn't practical, it's very practical in a different, larger way, but you've been working with hundreds and hundreds of people over many years, and could you give us a couple of examples of some of the changes that have taken place in people's lives from working with you?
Oh my goodness, yes, we've seen a lot of changes. Personality growth. And I'm not talking about just change for the sake of change. Uh-huh. The maturity so embraces, so absorbs all the person's dysfunctions that the person doesn't have to talk about, oh, I've got this problem or that. We don't talk about a picky-uni kind of a thing here and there to look for an attitude My mommy did this and my daddy did that. I'm saying the bottom line is when you develop a level of maturity, the energy will bestow upon you a greater value than all your problems have ever been.
So there's an increase in the size of one's own being relative to the so-called problems that we experience, which become shrunken. In a sense.
Yes, you expand.
Change in perspective.
Many people lose feelings, they don't know if they've lost feelings. They don't have any knowledge.
Yeah.
And they're sedated. They come in oftentimes, and I'm checking them out, looking for the energy sources that they are supposed to occur, and I find that they're sedated. And when you consider humanity, this sedation is a very interesting thing because it took me some years to figure this out. But as I saw this sedation, I wasn't quite aware of what I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that the high energy oftentimes went with sedation where you couldn't feel at all. And you tried to define your life on the basis of beliefs and attitudes with no feeling to support them.
Whereas our link to conscience, which is the basis, or should be the basis of our action, is through feeling.
That's right.
So if that's sedated, we're in trouble.
That's right.
And if you look at the world at large that we're living in, where people are perpetuating harm and destruction everywhere, against each other, against all sentient beings, against nature, so profoundly, it can only occur through the sedation of feeling.
Yes, that's right. Because the generic basis, without the generic basis, you exist, you can't live. And to me, you can become a robot, but you pay the price.
That's right. And what we have is a world without, that's dysfunctional, if you will.
Very much.
So,
at the highest level of success, they're dysfunctional.
Exactly. Well, this has been truly an incredible experience for me, and I think you're doing just fabulous work. I really do, and I hope you manage to awaken some of the more notable and powerful people in society rather quickly to avert any further future disasters.
Thank you, Michael.
So,
I'm going to be working out after I leave here.
Very good. You have your work cut out for you.
I know that.
Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And whenever you're in New York, please come back, and we want to continue on with this.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. Glad you tuned into the show, and I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. Please give a call at 212-420-0800. Share your thoughts and feelings with me. I love hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.